I hereby welcome you all to the third edition of eSummit, that is eSummit 2021, a pragmatic advent. Among us, we have two fantastic speakers with us today. Let me just give you a brief background on both of them. We would first introduce you to Saurabh Mukherjee, sir. He is the founder and chief investment officer of Marcellus Investment Managers, a London School of Economics alumni. He has over 2 decades experience in equity research and investment and has spent much of his career figuring out the length and breadth of the Indian equity market. Someone described him as the missing piece of a sane thought leader in Indian equities. Regular money central leaders would be definitely familiar with him. Saurav is author of the widely acclaimed book Coffee Can Investing, The Low Risk Route to Stupendous Wealth, beside the others, The Unusual Billionaires and Gurus of Chaos. And his recent book, The Victory Project, 6 Steps to Peak Potential, was published last year. His newsletters on Indian markets and investment practices are most widely read. Next, I would like to introduce Anupam Gupta to you all, who is an experienced chartered accountant and an investment research consultant in the stock markets based in Mumbai, and an author too. He also hosts a well-known and successful podcast show called Paisa Vaisa, which translates in English to that type of money. On the show, he talks to experts on personal finance. He's the co-author of the book The Victory Project: 6 Steps to Peak Potential. Now, the title of our keynote session, The Victory Project: 6 Steps to Peak Potential. There is always a need for self-help books, especially in this age when the newer generations with big dreams are facing stress and depression. This is the subject of Saurabh Mukherjee and Anupam Gupta sir's book, The Victory Project. Through real-life example of top Indian entrepreneurs, the book talks about practices and behaviors to achieve maximum potential in professional and social domains.
This big picture, we all know this, that India's GDP has tripled in the past 20 years on a per capita basis. We are now at about 2,000 US dollars from about 600 US dollars about 20 years ago. So it's a feat of, it's really a feat and achievement on this planet, because we've grown faster than any democracy has ever grown in the history of this planet. We've grown faster over the past 20 years than any large country has ever grown. Obviously, the sole exception, the three-tiered framework, which starts with first principles and goes to actual results. So the first tier consists of specialize, simplify, spiritualize, and we follow this up with specific behavior, which is clutter reduction, creativity, and memory and collaboration. And as you implement this 3+3 6-step process, you will see a massive transformation, and the top tier is the result. So both in business and in investing, we find that the most effective exponents, the most effective practitioners have adapted variations of the simplicity paradigm. The idea of specialization started some 300 years ago with Adam Smith, but the recent focus in the last decade or two has been traced to Malcolm Gladwell's book, very influential book Outliers, which talks about 10,000 hours of practice to master your talent very early in your career. So the question that we get asked the most is the starting point, right? How do you start? What do you specialize in? So the answer to that is in a very simple and elegant framework called Mastery by an American author called Robert Greene. The book is there on the slide, and he says that you have to specialize in what you love, you inherently love, something that innately appeals to you. So you have to find that one subject, that one area that intrigues you. And once you do that, then you find a guru who can mentor you. And the guru is someone who has mastered the specific area and can guide you, can give you shortcuts, and share his knowledge. And once you do that, once you've learned all of this, once the guru has mentored you, you go into what's called the creative active mode. And from there, you build your mastery. So the next one, simplification. Now, this sounds very simple because we are all consumers of simplicity. Some of the largest selling products are those that simplify our lives. The iPhone, for example, probably costs less than $500 or $600 and now retails for more than $1,000. Or the McDonald's burger that has made fast food ubiquitous all over the world, or index funds that Vanguard launched in the financial world back in the 70s. Or in India, the concept of SIP that has been there for a long time but has become popular in the last since about 2014, 2015, where you invest identical amounts month after month after month to fulfill your financial dreams. So these are all of these products are very powerful examples. I mean, these are very prosaic products that deliver simplicity in our life. So it would seem that delivering the simplicity sounds quite easy. And these products have also, in fact, changed the world. But creating these products is not easy at all. The way that it's done is in two levels. The first is simplification through process, and the second is simplification through principle. This shows that creating a routine in your day is one of the most powerful keys to living a successful life. So that was simplicity through routine. Um, we look at the second level, the simplicity through principles. It's a slightly more advanced level of simplicity. So whether it's the iPhone or the McDonald's burger or the SIP or the index fund, once these products hit the market with runaway success, everyone says they're easy to make. But actually, simplification through principles is the ultimate sophistication.
What spirituality does is it helps us cope with the facts that there are no future facts. There are no future facts which can help my colleagues at Marcellus look after the monies of thousands of people. Spirituality is basically therefore the bridge between our abilities and the application of that ability to the world around us. Ray Dalio is the fund manager who's explained this most clearly. Ray Dalio says in his book Principles, the most valuable habit I've acquired, he says, is using pain to trigger quality reflections. If you can acquire this habit, you'll learn what causes you pain and what you can do about it. And it'll have an enormous impact on your effectiveness, right? There's another fund manager, American fund manager called Jason Voss. He's written a super book called The Intuitive Investor on how spirituality helps you make better investment decisions, right? So Jason came to Mumbai 4 years ago to talk about his book. We met him then. And then whilst writing the Victory Project, Anupam and I Skyped with him a couple of times. And he gave us, solid insights into how spirituality, how meditation helps not only in relaxation, not only in improving focus, it helps you understand that the people around you, your family, your colleagues, your friends' happiness actually is far more important than your own, right? And, another way of putting it is Jason helped us understand that meditation helps your mind deal with stress, heals your mind, and lets you perform at a much higher level for far longer than you would have otherwise. So, just to quote from Jason's book now, meditation practices are the polishing techniques that help you be the best. You need to find the tools and techniques that exalt your consciousness. Once you discover what makes you and your talents unique, and that's only found through spirituality, then all of a sudden magic happens. Right? Why are we so focused on this subject of reducing mental clutter? Because there's a heck of a lot of psychological research which shows that memory plays a massive part in creativity. We'll come back to this in a minute. Memory and creativity fundamentally linked, and the less cluttered your mind is, there's a lot of research which shows the less cluttered your mind is, the longer you remember, the stronger your memories are. And there's a concept called the Ebbinghaus forgetting curve, which captures this link. Less clutter, stronger memories, longer memories, greater creativity, greater success. Right? So decluttering, essential part of achieving outsized success. Get your goals sorted out. Get a checklist which helps you execute on your goals. Now, let's go to creativity. Right, this is the engine room. Right, in a highly competitive free market economy, even if your ideas are only marginally better than your peers, you will be in high demand. Original thought, therefore, becomes the key driver of wealth and success in our world. Over the last 50 years, people like Adam Grant, Doris Wallace, Howard Gruber, their work has shown that actually very similar drivers, 5 common things to creative giants the world over. Creativity is central to success. It's not going to come from swatting endlessly in class. You need widespread reading, lots of travel, variety of experiences, and heavy duty memories, right? We find almost all of these qualities in Sanjeev Bikhchandani, the man who built Naukri.com, which is inside the massive listed company now called InfoEdge, right? And as some of you might know, InfoEdge also owns massive stakes in Zomato, Policy Bazaar. Some of India's most successful startups have been funded by Sanjeev, decade after decade. He's a super example of a local Indian creative who's achieved billionaire status just by following these principles. No matter how creative you are, if you want to change the world with your ideas, you need to learn to how to influence other people and win their support. And even you need to win their support in collaboration and in favor of your ideas. It's very counterintuitive. You want to change the world, you got to get other people to buy into your ideas and collaborate with you in favor of a common cause, right? This is one of the central lessons I think we took away from the book, that success is not about the individual, success is about the collective, and how the collective comes together and delivers outsized performance. I think is one of the most fascinating aspects of high performance literature. The greatest teams we discovered are teams of rivals, teams of diverse sets of people who might not always agree with each other but work together for a common goal, right? The most famous examples are obviously in politics. Abraham Lincoln and the cabinet he built to drag America out of the ashes of the Civil War. And closer home in India, Mahatma Gandhi and the first post-independence cabinet in India. Right, Gandhiji, as you know, brought together people like Sardar Patel and Baba Sahib Ambedkar, fierce political rivals. He united them in the common cause of building the constitution which governs our lives. You can see this in the world of investing as well. I think Anupam talked about Ramdev Agarwal ji. If you see Motilal Oswal, it's a coming together of two very different people, Motilal Oswal ji, Ramdev Agarwal ji. They come together to create a famous partnership, another famous partnership, Warren Buffett, Charlie Munger, right? Yet another one, George Soros, Stanley Druckenmiller. This is actually very common in the investment management industry, because in investment management, by definition, you need different personalities to see the world from different perspectives. And if they can integrate, come together in a common cause, then बहुत पैसा बनता है. Now let's come to investment implications. पैसा कैसे बनता है? Simple takeaway from the book. Simple investment ideas deliver remarkable results if implemented by motivated and a committed group of individuals. When committed, motivated people come together, they can use a simple idea to deliver remarkable results, right? In the book, we've talked about Vanguard and the impact John Bogle's idea, which led to the creation of Vanguard in 1976, had, right? As many of you know, Vanguard today is the world's largest fund house, manages $6 trillion US dollars. I read in a recent SEC filing that Vanguard staff, remember this is the third generation of Vanguard staff. Vanguard's current staff alone own $120 million of Vanguard units. That gives you a sense of wealth creation from such a simple idea. And if I look back at my own career, right, and I've narrated these experiences in the book, much of what we do at Marcellus, many of these ideas came from dinners, drinks, lunches with other thinkers, other gurus who've taught us a lot of what we know. So, for example, the idea for our Little Champs portfolio came from reading a book called Hidden Champions of the 21st Century. It's a book by a German management consultant. My guru in London, John Kay, told me to read that book. From that book came the idea of our Little Champs portfolio. The trilogy of books that we have now written, we're now at the end of that trilogy. For most of the last 7-8 years, right, Anupam and I have tried to understand the drivers of greatness, the drivers of outsized success. In Unusual Billionaires, we began the journey of understanding corporate greatness, right? We profiled a unique set of companies who have delivered outstanding financial performance year after year, indeed decade after decade. We translated these guardrails of superior financial performance. We translated them into a portfolio construct that retail investors can implement. We translated this into a portfolio construct in our book Coffee Can Investing, right? And we've tried to give people a book that can use them to unlock significant financial gain. And now we've finished this trilogy with an overarching philosophy to live great lives, right? In spite of everything that's happened in the last 8-9 months, right? And I can see from your own sort of challenges, right, of studying from home and so on, we believe it is possible to live great lives in this great country, right? And following the simplicity paradigm is a means to that end.
So modern capitalism is all about collaboration, not competition. Can you give an example or elaborate?
So let's take the example of the most successful so-called capitalist community in India, right? The Marwadis. There are 8 million Marwadis in India out of a population of 1.4 billion. And obviously, the Marwadis' grip on national GDP is beyond all representation, right? They account for a chota sa percentage of our population. And as per some studies, nearly 1/5 of Indian GDP is controlled by Marwadis. Now, you notice Marwadis have an incredibly cooperative ethic. Whichever city I've stayed in India, the Marwadi community helps each other, collaborates, they do community events together.
Working is a very thought-provoking and intriguing point. But Marwadis don't own big companies compared to others. Okay, so is small-scale industry the answer to better GDP or something we need to focus in India for better family economy? Okay, so I'll take a jab at this, and then I'll let Saurabh expand. So first point, Marwadis don't own big companies compared to others. I'm not sure about that. You might want to check the Nifty 50 list out there. Okay, you see something like an Ultratech or a Shri Cement or say, I don't know, a Bajaj Finance or a Bajaj Auto or the list is
I once came across a company called Aditya Birla. पता नहीं कौन owner है उसका.
yeah.
Sounds a little hard.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, and I don't even want to go into how many of the top tier CEOs, VP, senior level people are Marwadis. But listen, okay, we're not trying to make a point that if you're Marwadi, you are bound for success. Let's not go into that. Our focus was on the fact that this is a community that has very unique traits of collaboration without a leader on top. Okay, and this model has worked for them. Okay, now neither me or Saurabh, can give the answer to GDP growth or what we need to focus in India. That's probably for a wider discussion for another forum. What we like to focus out here is that if you are, if you follow the steps of the Victory Project, there's a very high chance that you will achieve success, outsized success, not the middling success that you would get from hustling. I'll let Saurabh expand this.
This is very interesting, right? So far, the companies we just highlighted, the Marwadi companies, are, you would say, sort of traditional economy companies. What's so intriguing is how much outsized success Marwadis are also attaining in the new economy. One of the reasons for that is, again, this collaborative ethic, right? So Flipkart, right? No, you don't need a better example than Flipkart as another exemplar of Marwadi success. Motilal Oswal, one of the first independent asset management firms and a multi-billion-dollar asset management firm. So remarkable community, and in a way, the notion that Marwadi success, a lot of people, including a lot of my Bong relatives, believe that Marwadi success is due to some, hustle, some dodgy thing, right? There's something sort of deeply insidious they believe about Marwadi success. Marwadi success is actually fundamentally underpinned in deeply collaborative ethic. They help each other and they work bloody hard, right? And there's a lot to be said for both of these. What's very interesting is, I love this question because it gives you a sense of how social conditioning has influenced us. We've been taught in our growing up years that these people are hustlers, so you got to hustle if you're going to get somewhere. And there's something about hard work that people haven't associated. Most Marwadi business people that we have seen who have succeeded work their backsides flat and they help each other. You do those two things, any community in any country, you will hit the big time.
You just have to get into a mode of focus where you have to ruthlessly remove those parts that don't belong in your life, whether that is social media, waking up every day and checking your WhatsApp, checking your CNBCs, checking your everything else. You just have to make a routine and stick to it ruthlessly. And the central, doing what you love has to make a very special part of that. So deep focus, that's what I mentioned, traveling, meeting different people, and enhancing your creativity all goes towards decluttering in your professional life. The idea being that the more faff, the more trash you remove from your head, the more space you have in your head to focus on doing what you love.
What I learned from talking to a few other people 4 or 5 years ago was to count backwards from 100 to 1, right? And when you count backwards from 100 to 1, you try to visualize every number. Initially, I thought, this though is so such a childlike thing, and then I realized to my amazement that this counting backwards from 100 to 1 is actually very hard if your mind is all over the place, right? So just counting backwards and visualizing every number in your mind as you count backwards is what I use, and typically it settles me down. Believe it or not, in more instances than one. If I've been stressed at the beginning of my counting, by the end of the counting, I can't understand why I was stressed, right? So why does this work? What Jason Voss says in The Intuitive Investor is, what happens is you're switching off the egoic mind. The egoic mind is the me part of it, right? And it refuses to let go of you. And especially when you get stressed about something, right? Say, your fund performance, your client ka paisa aega, nahi aega, etc. Especially when you get stressed, your egoic mind, basically drives takes over the control of your brain. By making yourself do a low intensity mental task like just counting backwards from 100 to 1, you're distracting your ego. And as you distract your ego, your mind settles down. It helps you calm down. If you go into more deeper meditation techniques, which I confess I don't know, if you do deeper meditation techniques, it not only helps you calm down, it also drives creativity. We haven't got there. People like Jason Voss have got there, and both Ray Dalio and Jason Voss, who are very successful fund managers, swear by it.
The last question is on social media, right? I mean, if you utilize it positively, for example, learning from various pages related to your field of interest, would it still be considered bad? I'll just give a very short answer to this. I am on social media, right? I am prolific on Twitter. I post on LinkedIn, blah blah, etc. etc. So the thing is curation. Everything on social media is about curation, right? There are a lot of sources within our book that we have gathered from social media. Shane Farnham, for example, has a fantastic blog, that's social media. He's got a super Twitter account. Naval Ravikant also has a very useful. The whole thing is about how you use social media, right? And both of us, Saurabh and me, have very different approaches. Saurabh is totally against it, and that works for him very, very, very well because it helps him to focus. I limit my time. I am ruthless with my routine out there, right? If this is a time slot for it, that's it. Obsessively checking social media for some kind of popularity contest or validation or for other stuff, that is where we have a problem. If you're very clear about curating content and getting value out of social media, then go for it, provided, like I said, you have a plan and you stick to a routine.